Well, we got this thing back in the shop after the Insanity Fab Winter Challenge. And we ended up getting knocked out of the race because we had a link weld failure. You can see the weld kind of peeled off of the link mount here. I'm a mechanic first and welder second, I guess. And then it ripped some of the chassis there when that link mount came off. You can also see we kind of bent the crap out of that link. It's kind of bowed up a little bit too, but aluminum links bend, especially when you land a 7,000 pound rig on them. So we're going to leave it bent for a little while. These are only 2.5 inch link. I can move up to a 3 inch link, but on my front axle, the drive shaft is pretty close. So I'm going to try and stick to 2.5s, and maybe since we won't be racing this thing in the future as much, we won't have that issue. This is the damage to the chassis. You can see it ripped out the bottom section there, and then it bent in the chassis on the top there and kind of put a little hump in the top of that. That is 2x6, 3/16 wall square tubing, so definitely took a hit there. We also pulled this brake line fitting out of the caliper. Didn't mess up the threads too bad. Those fittings really didn't go in that far, but we were in the middle of race prep, and we didn't have time to wait on better fittings, so we just left these in there. They held just fine, but whenever the rig lands on it, it doesn't hold up very good. We got new calipers for the rear because these were incorrect volume anyhow. We also broke the sway bar end links, because whenever you lose a link of your forelink on a triangulated forelink, it doesn't have a track bar or anything to hold the axle center, so the rig laid over this way and it just sheared those links off on the sway bar. This was the repair that we did while in a mud hole at the race. This is a picture of said mud hole. This link was laid outside of the frame, and I said I didn't care, so we just booger welded it on there, and it held it good enough to drive back to the trailer. On the front axle, we bent this tubing pretty good. This is only 188 wall though, so in the future, if I have to cut this off, I'll definitely do some quarter wall, but for now, that will hold just fine. That definitely took a hell of a rock to bend that in. I could also scab it over with some plate or something, but not worried about cosmetic imperfections. Now for my least favorite part of this process, we have to bust out the fabrication tools and start fixing this frame. I've got to plasma gouge this trail repair off the side of the chassis. And if you look down here, you can see just how damaged that frame section is. This is 2x6, 3/16 wall, and this frame is actually bent in here pretty bad. It cracked the weld out on this cross member, but I don't know what we're going to do here, but we're going to do something. This is the passenger side upper link mount on the rear, and you can see we were about to have a bad day right there too. It started cracking this off the chassis here on the top there. It also bent this bracket in like this because that bolt was not touching the chassis there, and I can see in person that this is dented in. So this bracket is twisted like this. Yay. Got that bracket plasma gouged out of there. I really like plasma gouging because it's really fine to control. You can get in there and just unweld it. Here you can see just how mangled the chassis is where this link mount came off. We've got to get that bend out of there so that our new link mount won't be tilted at an angle. My plan is kind of like the body guys do. I'm going to weld this to the chassis, then I'm going to heat the chassis, and then I'm going to like pry on this or use a slide hammer to whack this out until we get it somewhat either flush or protruding past, and then we can smack it back with a hammer. Oh yeah, that sounds beautiful. I was welding through the paint. So this is the get up we got. We got a plate welded to this side of the chassis, our chain hoist, and then another plate on that side. Now we're going to heat up that section of frame and pull, and it should pull that frame section out real nicely. And yeah, without too much effort from us. So we'll see. Should have seen that coming.
Nice, I'm not strong.
Yep, Michael very strong. Well, it was a good idea, I think. I just need to cut off the plate where it can't do that again. So that was a fail. I had Michael cut this off and polish it up. We're gonna try it a second time. It's always something. The damn chain fall only rotates in one direction now, and we're really running short on chain here, so we've got this thing taken apart, and now we're gonna pop this gear off here and see if we can't figure out why. Let's try this again, shall we? Mother. Hate when that happens. God damn it. I remember my first time. Bruh. Mother. I am. So we had to throw in the towel and go pick up my father-in-law's torch assembly because mine, the Rosebud, is apparently too large, and you can see the volume difference between the two. And allegedly, I'm not a welder, but allegedly the welders are telling me that the tanks aren't large enough to flow enough volume, and therefore it's picking up like liquid acetylene out of the tank, and then that's causing our flame to blow out. So we got the father-in-laws here, and we're gonna try and heat it up that way. Turn it, pull. So we did what I wanted to do, which was pull the frame out, and now we're past flush because the tension on this just kind of pulled it together a little further than anticipated, but that's fine. We'll hammer it back flat, plate this son of a gun, and put our new link mount on. I'd used the plasma gouger to gouge out my welds on this bracket on the top and bottom because it was cracking out of this corner here. And so now we'll be able to clean that up and put some nice new welds in there before we do our bracing. We got it heated up and hammered back flat as we can. Looks pretty damn good considering how damaged it was. The frame rail still has a little bow in it, but you're not gonna be able to fix that, so I'm pretty happy with that. Got fusion pulled up here and got our frame brace drawn out and ready to cut. Now we've got everything pretty well prepped for welding. I'm gonna weld this in here real good where I plasma gouged out that weld. This is our patch plate for the chassis. So it goes in at an angle like so. And then it's gonna get held up here and then we'll weld it. So I'll bring you back for that. The first patch plate's welded in there. So it don't look pretty, but there's no more holes in the frame, and it's as flat as it needs to be for where we're going. And now we've got our piece of Holy plate here. It's nice and flat, but we'll take care of that. Got plenty of weld holes so that this will adhere. If we didn't have these holes in here, then the plate wouldn't have any support anywhere other than around the outside. Oh, wow, that's hot. Whew. Whew. My glove is on fire. Oh, there went the heat.
Oh no.
Okay. That's what it's looking like after the welding was done. Shouldn't go anywhere. These are just plug welds. I'm not concerned at all about them having like the smallest divot in there. It's purely a aesthetical thing, and there's gonna be a big tab going over here anyways, and it will not overhang any of these divots, so it's not important.
Do we need it right here though? I thought we can. Or you gotta resize those holes first.
We're resizing the holes.
Okay.
I'm trying to figure out a way to do it without dying. You're gonna be wondering what the fuck we're talking about. No, let's just unclamp that.
Come on. There we go.
Now that we have these drilled out to 3/4 inch, we need to put on this plate here. And so I'm gonna measure and center up this plate. We're gonna weld it, then we'll flip it over, mark our holes and pre-drill them, and then we'll go through at the 3/4 inch, and then we'll be ready to weld this to this. Not bad for a mechanic. Now we're ready to go ahead and assemble this thing for welding. So this is our piece that we need to sit down in here. Now we're gonna put this heim joint in here as a spacer to hold this separated, but we're also gonna add this little 60,000 inch thick washer so that whenever we weld it, if it tries to pull together, once we remove this heim joint, you know, this will take up for that and the joint will still be able to go in and out without us having to fight it. We got it bolted together now with our little shim in there. So we're gonna go ahead and start welding this thing out. Here I'm just putting a big old 45-degree bevel on this plate so that we'll have a nice area to weld onto the frame. Just like my grandpappy used to say, if you can't weld good, weld a lot. So we welded a lot. Got 3 passes, top, bottom, and the front. And now we get to work on gusseting. While I was under here, you can see that we bent the sway bar tabs on both ends. So we're gonna pull those off and press them back straight again. Now we're cutting the cross member that's gonna go between those 2 upper link mounts. I kinda just laid it across and then from the underside came in here with a Sharpie. We got the cross member fit up in here, and it's got a little gap, but we'll make that work with weld. And it's on that side. I would have liked to have offset this more, but we have to have room to get the bolts out, and it's already pretty tight. But might have to just grind the head of the bolt a little bit. Should be all right. So we're gonna weld her in. Look at how majestic he looks holding that hose. Oh yeah. Got the cross member all welded in. We went ahead and added these 2 uprights to the lower link brackets to keep this from trying to twist up. It hasn't yet, but why not? We done broke stuff that I never figured we would, so can't hurt to add a couple extra pounds in the ass end here. We're ready to reassemble, but first, Michael gets to paint our chassis with some mailbox paint. His favorite time is arts and crafts. There was a lot of these tabs that we welded on that were not painted. And then the cage, whenever we were pressure washing it, or Michael was pressure washing all the mud off, we kind of blew some of that paint off in certain areas. This stuff is very durable, but we got some touch up to do. Happy little trees, Michael. Happy little trees. Just so you know, if you dump dogs on the side of the road, you're scum of the earth. But I guess with that being said, these pups are probably better off without whoever dumped them. So we picked them up because they're laying in the road. And thankfully we found a new home for them. This was our other pup that we rescued off the side of the road, but we're gonna keep her. She got dumped on our county road and she come up to the house and she's pretty good, ain't you, girl? Michael got everything painted up all pretty. Got our new rod ends in from Brainick, threaded back in. As the old ones kind of broke whenever the suspension went. Whenever we were in the race, this thing got caught up in the steering column. This is my dump valve button for fun launching the truck. And so we got to new Motion Raceworks one here. And whenever I get it put back on the truck, I'll have to see if I can't figure out a way to keep that from happening again. They don't come with any connector on the end because it can be in tons of different applications, so we're just going to put a Deutsch connector on here. I decided to bust this bad boy open, and even after Michael pressure washing the rig several times, there was no signs of water intrusion, not to mention the race that we went to, but you can see all the mud from the race inside that little nylon or Teflon seal there, so I think this will last quite a while. We gotta get this nut and washer all the way down here to the switch, and the easiest way to do that is just to pull the cable out. So you gotta have these special pliers for these Deutsch connectors, and you drop the little barrel down in there. You just put your wire in there and ratchet it closed, and now it's on there. Then we just push them off in the connector here through the rubber seal in the back. Bam. Then we just gotta drop this little chingadera down in there. Push it in. We got us a new connector for our steering wheel, so we can take it in and out of the vehicle with the quick release here, and then being able to disconnect it on this end. These are the two coolant hoses that transfer coolant from the radiator to the engine, and whenever we were building this thing, we kind of ran out of time. Slash didn't care, so we just zip tied these to the chassis with some large zip ties. I would like to make a more permanent solution going forward. And the other thing that zip ties don't supply is this hose is actually rather heavy, and then you add coolant, and I don't want it pulling on these radiator hoses any more than it should, so we're going to put them out here so that there's not a whole lot of weight being suspended by the radiator itself. Picked up some 2 3/4 DOM, so it's seamless tubing, so it's nice and smooth on the inside, and it's quarter wall, so what that gives us is 2 1/4 inch inside diameter, and the hose that runs on the side of the chassis is 2 1/4 inch outside diameter. So my plan is to cut this tubing, slit it down the middle and take a little bit out, weld a flange here or something so we can adjust the tension on the hose, and then somehow fix that to the chassis. So stay tuned. This is kind of what we're after. The hoses will run through, and I went ahead and cut a 1/4 inch out of the overall diameter of the pipe. That's why it looks more like an oval instead of a circle. That way it can crush down on those tubes, and we'll put some red Loctite on here so that we can kind of set the tension on these hoses. There she is. They're not going anywhere. And then we got one more here. Holds it up off the control arm. Yeah. We had to bend this bracket a little bit to keep it from cutting into that hose, but yeah, much better than it was before. We're going to pull these diff covers, and that thing got smacked pretty good, so we're gonna use a strip bolt remover. This thing's only got like 10 miles on the whole thing. Smacked the hell out of that diff cover too. Bashed it in. The front diff, seen better days. Got a tooth broken here, and there's some debris down in there. This is the rear axle that we set up in the snow. Here's a picture of my crew and myself putting in work, trying to get this axle rebuilt in the dirt. We didn't have any precision tools, and we were still pretty good on our backlash. 10 miles on the K30's 14 bolts. We got some exploded ring gear there, and a rock trying to come through the cover there, causing the ring gear to touch the cover. Mint. This was the front differential. You can see Paul set this gear set up, but it had a beautiful contact patch right here in the center, and it still ended up breaking the teeth off of it. This tooth here, focus, is cracked all the way down the root of the tooth. You can see it cracked along in here all the way across. So this thing, I didn't even know it was broke until we took the cover off, so she was not long for this world. This was the used gear that we put in the dirt at the race, and you can see it's cracking this tooth here, it's cracking this tooth here. We set this up with no precision tools. We didn't bother taking a gear mesh pattern. We just had to get it in between races, so it wouldn't surprise me if this failed as a result of poor setup. Michael's getting the roll carts cleaned up, getting parts looking good. Those 300M Brainic 40 splines are still looking in good shape, along with the Mark Williams 40 spline rears. They're still in perfect shape. What we've got to reassemble this thing with is a AAM 410 gear set that has been cryogenically treated, where they freeze it with, I believe, like liquid nitrogen down to like a super cold temperature, and then they slowly bring it back, and it's supposed to strengthen the material. And then it's also been rim finished, so that's why it's really shiny. That reduces the friction between these two gears. It eliminates the need for break-in. It probably was unnecessary, but we went ahead and did it anyhow. And that's how the gears look in the housing. Pretty cool. So now we're gonna start getting things prepped, and then we've got a Yukon Master Install Kit with Timken bearings. 14 bolts have a pinion support bearing here that goes on the snout of the pinion, and it's got little rollers, and occasionally the cage will fail and the rollers will fall out into the housing. So Busted Knuckles sells this. It's not bronze. They've got some proprietary, or they've found some material that works best, and it goes on there like that and prevents that needle roller bearing, because if one of these comes out and goes into the gears, then it screws the whole thing up. They do recommend these only for race use. They said that this new material they found has worked out well even for trail riding, so we're going to give them a shot and just monitor them as the season goes on. I don't really drive this thing at high rates of speed, so it should be okay. One of the things that we're changing this go around is all the gears that failed in this rig are a 5-cut tooth, meaning that this end of the tooth is taller than this end. And the gears that we're using now are a 2-cut design, meaning the tooth is the same height here as here. It's not necessarily a strength advantage, it's just a different manufacturing process. It does come out with a different pattern. I'll be interested to see how these hold up comparatively. This is our first pattern that we've got here, and this side doesn't look horrendous, but this side looks very deep, evident by that flat line at the bottom. So Yukon sends us shims. These shims go in between here, this pinion support and the housing, and what that does is that pulls the pinion out to adjust our pinion depth. Unfortunately, they only offer these, or they only send us like 10s, 15s, and 20s. Like every one of these is damn near a sheet of plate. They're just super thick. So we're gonna start with the thinnest one they gave us, which is a 10,000. And if that pulls our pinion too far out, then we'll have to put a shim underneath the bearing here to push the pinion back into the housing. So wish me luck. I hope this works, but I don't have high hopes. Pattern numero dos, looking much better. We're gonna try and add some more shim to it, see what it looks like. This is why I love AAM axles, is to do a pinion depth adjustment. I don't have to take my carrier out. I literally just pull the bolts out, whack the pinion out, change my shim that goes here, bolt it back in, and run another pattern. And if I need to adjust my backlash, you got the side adjusters here. That's why I chose not to do Dana 80s on this rig, was because of trail serviceability. People argue all the time if the 80 or the 14 bolt's stronger. I believe the 80 is stronger in my opinion, but because it's an 11.25 inch ring gear versus this is 10.5. But people still debate it all the time. This is the final pattern we're going to stick with. It's a very traditional 2-cut gear pattern, nice and centered between the root and the flank. It's not running off the edge of the tooth. It's exactly what we're after. Now that we have the front differential assembled, I needed to go ahead and start assembling one of these pinion supports, and starting by putting the races in the housing. So on this one, I put the front one in, and now I went to put the back one in. Tu mas grande. And same on this one. There are obviously 2 different designs on these 14-bolt pinion supports. So thankfully, I got the old bearing and race out and got the part numbers and called a local bearing store called Bowles Bearings. They've been around for 50 years down here in San Antonio, and they got me some made in USA Timken bearings and some Japanese coil bearings. Some of y'all may be wondering why I only have 2 differentials, but I've got 3 pinion supports. Well, the one, one in the truck and then 2 here on the bench. What I'm gonna do, because this worked out great, was I'm gonna have one assembled with a 3rd because I have a third ring and pinion for a spare, and I'm gonna have one assembled just as a trail spare, so that in the event I break on the trail, I literally unbolt the broke one, bolt in the new one without any need to hammer in races or bearings or anything, and I can just bolt a new ring gear on. That's exactly what we did at Insanity Fab, and it worked perfect. Hopefully we won't need it, but I'm definitely gonna have a backup. It's important when you're working with several gear sets that are all the exact same that you make sure and keep this pinion with this ring gear, because during the manufacturing process, these two are actually lapped together, so they should stay together. So I took an engraver tool and I put a number 3 on the end of the pinion here, and then I put a number 3 on the gear. The one in the front housing is number 1, and the one in the rear housing is numero 2. Nailed the rear on the first try with 15 thousandths pinion depth. Very happy with that pattern. Remember, these are 2-cut gears, so it makes more of a triangle pattern as opposed to your traditional 5-cut. So we'll send it. Now we get to pull the pinions out and do our pinion bearing preload. We've got to take this pinion back out of this pinion support so we can go ahead and add our crush sleeve and pinion seal and get this whole thing put together and ready to go back in the differential now that we have our pinion depth established. I used to just right off the hop, I would assemble this, put the pinion seal in, do the crush sleeve, because all your pinion depth adjustment is via the shims here around the bolts. But in some cases, you end up with 0 shim stack here, and you want the pinion even deeper, so you'd have to pull this back out and add shims underneath this bearing, and then you've already wasted a crush sleeve at that point. That's why I wait until I have my pinion depth set before I go ahead and final assemble this. So we're going to take it back apart, repress our lower bearing, add the crush sleeve, and then we'll go from there. Once again, it's extremely important if you're working with 2 identical differentials that you keep parts together. I've got yellow paint on this pinion that goes in this pinion support, because if I were to accidentally put this pinion in this housing, whenever we go back together, the pinion depth would be wrong, because the housings are machined a little different and the bearing tolerances are a little different or whatever. So keep them together. So now we're ready to final assemble our supports. This one is not the yellow one, so we're going to take the not colored case. We've got oil on our bearings. Drop that, drop the crush sleeve, upper pinion bearing. So we've still got play in our pinion support there due to the crush sleeve. But now we can go ahead and put our pinion seal in and our yokes on. Don't forget to pack the backside of the seal to keep this garter spring right here from falling off and going into the pinion bearing, because you may not notice it until it's too late. Here we're just pressing the yoke on. You could use that air hammer attachment I have, but we're going to try and pre-crush this crush sleeve so we don't have to really fight it when it comes time. So still got plenty of play in there. We're going to give her a little action. See, that's as much as I got, and I can't crush that sleeve. I put the old extender bar on her. Really give her the beanie weenies. Ah, you son of a... Ow. We're going to stop while we're ahead, but that's much closer than what it was before we started. So now we've got just enough play so we can set our final preload with an impact, or if we have to, a torque multiplier. So I got this brand new Cornwell impact. It has drives that you can change. You can put a 3/8 in here, and we changed it to a 3/4 drive so we don't have to use an adapter when going to a 3/4 inch socket. and hopefully this is enough ass to go ahead and tighten down this pinion nut. The last time we did these gears in this truck, we had to use a torque multiplier on here with like an 8-foot breaker bar. So we'll see if these are a little more forgiving. I've got no play, and I put marks in the socket so I can kind of visually see how much the socket's turning. And I know that right now we have like 0 preload on the bearings, so I'm just gonna watch those lines and tighten it up a little more. Spec is 25 to 35, and we have 0 right now. The only thing we really have is the load of the pinion seal. We're going to wait for the compressor to kick off. Now they just kick back on. I think it kicks on at 160 or something like that. I don't know. Anyways, we're going to wait for it to build back up to 175 and give this impact a little more grunt. So we got about 20 inch-pounds on it now. We're going to go to the higher end of the spec. Yep. So we're going to leave it right at like 30. So. Cool. This one's almost broke. This one's broke. This one's more broke. That one's really broke. And just like that, we have a trail spare. I've got a seal put in it. The crush sleeve is in. I crushed it to where it doesn't have but just a little bit more to go to crush it down. Good old Milwaukee M18 ought to do that. All I have to do is transfer the yoke onto here, which we did in the snow before, so it shouldn't be a big problem. We got our new 14-bolt diff cover in from Rough Stuff. This is 3/8 inch thick AR 500, so it's extremely tough stuff. And whenever they're done welding this, it tends to warp, and so they put it in a mill and make this nice and flat. These other diff covers that I got on this thing are only 5/16 here, or quarter, I don't remember which, and that's why they bent whenever I smashed a rock. And then they were also not milled flat, so whenever you put them on a level surface, they go tink, 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 tink. So I would have bought 2 of these, but they only had 1 in stock, so we're going to put the weak one on the rear because I typically don't run into things real hard with the rear of the truck. Sheesh! That duplicate colored cast iron, that's some nice looking paint there. And what better place to paint it than on your blown up 383? More on that later. Got Michael filling these things up with some Pepto-Bismol. Stuff kind of looks a little funny. Pour out. Interesting colored gear oil, but it's Redline shock-proof gear oil, so anything we can put in here to make a difference, we're gonna try. Well, we got the K30 loaded up. We're heading up to Holden Bros Diesel in Bernie. We're gonna put this on their chassis dyno and see what kind of power it makes. As far as the engine goes, this is a stock bottom end 12 valve. It's got ARP fasteners in the bottom end, but other than that, it's completely stock. It's got opened up ring gaps to protect the engine a little bit. Stock camshaft. It's got a benched 12 millimeter P-pump. It's got a fast 290 feeding it. It's got 5,000 RPM governor springs in there, and it's got a full travel kit on the AFC from Power Driven Diesel. It's got bigger push rods, better valve springs, a Steed Speed manifold, a 6368 Borg Warner, and it's got a manifold mounted wastegate on it. It's got 5x14 injectors. That's about it as far as the motor's concerned. It does have a Turbo 400 with a non-lockup converter, so that's definitely going to hurt our power number. But a lockup 400 is like 30 grand, and I'm so far into this thing, we're just going to run what we got for now. It does have a hybrid 48RE converter, which is much tighter than my old converter I had in here. I did put this thing on the dyno at Truck Source Diesel, I don't know, 7 or 8 years ago, and it made 360 wheel horsepower. We're going to take off the 47-inch boggers for the dyno, and we're going to put on some 35-inch mud grapplers. And these axles now have 410 gears in them, so we'll see what she does. Got her unloaded over here at Holden Brothers. Say hi, Willie.
What up?
And Steven.
Howdy, howdy.
And we got the baby 35s on her. They ain't got much tread left, but that's what we're after. They're not going to explode. And since their dyno's under a overhang, we had to add the smoke diverter. We found out here that I had it in low range like an idiot. Well, we're back from Holden Brothers. Nothing exploded on the dyno, so the next thing, and hopefully the last thing before we get to go wheel this thing, is we get to pull the transmission back out because we have low line pressure. Currently in reverse, we have like 30 PSI, and in forward like 150. I'm not a transmission builder, but I called my transmission builder, and he was like, yeah, that's way low. So he's got a plan to correct it. The guy I'm taking it to is not the guy that originally built it, or even the guy before that. So we did slip reverse really hard in the race.
Oh, that tranny didn't like that. Look out. Yeah! Start over.
It's got a really weak reverse. That's due to having low line pressure. So where it's got 30 PSI now, we want like something like 200 at idle. So anyways, Michael and I are gonna bust this thing out and get it taken out. It's currently Thursday, and we need to be wheeling next Thursday. So wish me luck. There's no audio on this clip, but I figured I'd just show y'all picking it up on the car lift. Well, this didn't take long. While we had the trans out, we decided to inspect these bushings, and both the front and rear have spun in the housing. Womp womp. Well, I'm definitely not excited to have to do this on a set of axles that cost me $25,000, but the factory pinion bearing, the cage fails, these needle rollers fall out, pretty common failure point. So I tried the bushings. They burned up within 5 miles. So now a fellow named Chris Kaufman that owns Showstopper, which is a 1,000 horsepower rock bouncer, said that he has had very good success with this. Says for 5 years now, he's been running 16 roller bearings in his pinion support. So that's what we've got here. You can see we do have that one open space there, and it just kind of moves around as it wants. But there's no play in the bearing. It feels just as tight as the factory one as far as, you know, play this way. So we're gonna take his advice and give it a shot. I am not a transmission builder, so I'm just going based off what he told me, but there was a few sets of burned clutches in this thing. This was a drum where the reverse band rides, and it was pretty shot. This was the transmission all tore apart. And then he put a better pump in it that has an adjustable regulator and some Pro Mod drum. I don't know much about transmissions, that's why I pay people to do them. But he got this thing turned around for me in like 3 days time, so huge shout out to him for doing that for me. Otherwise, we wouldn't have been able to make the run that we were after. Well, all the snake oil in the world wasn't enough to keep these axles alive on these tires and the power this thing makes. So here you can see we cracked a tooth on the front ring gear on the 14 bolt, so these axles are not going to cut it going forward. So this will be the last time you see it on 14 bolts. My buddy Doug is going to buy these axles for like 10 grand less than what I have in them, and we will just have to go from there. It sucks, but I went down the 14 bolt road because that was the best solution at the time for the money. I knew there was a chance that it wouldn't hold up, and then once we got this thing put together and making more power and then went to a 47-inch sticky compound tire, there was just no way these things were going to last. But yeah, this probably will get resumed sometime towards the end of the year, rebuild it during the winter time, and go wheeling next year and hopefully have some fun with this thing for once instead of just dumping god-awful amounts of money in it. But we'll see you next time.